Hello and welcome to Full Moon in Leo for this February 12th. So, in this place, we do gene keys, we do gene keys transits, we talk about how we live those expressions of energies and in our personalities and how we're playing out day to day, and also in our businesses, what we're creating and what we're hoping to be the truth of our legacy moving forward. So we look at two kind of aspects to the energy. We look at the Gene Keys and Quantum Human Design by Karen Curry Parker. So Gene Keys is by Richard Rudd. And there are two different systems, and the quantum human design system is based on human design, and it is human design. It's a feminine approach that she has specialized for her work and her audience, and she's developed the whole school. She's incredible. So if you want to know more about human design, I highly recommend her. And then Gene Keys, of course, is Richard Rudd's work, and it's on the Gene Keys website. But if you want to know more about that, you can always reach out and connect to me. I'm doing a couple of classes on Gene Keys this year, so hopefully you will be able to catch one of my events in which I'm sharing that. So again, full moon in Leo is how we know it by the Western astrology. And it's in the gate 4 of quantum human design of possibility. And it's the gene key of understanding. So the shadow in the gene keys is intolerance. The gift is understanding. And the siddhi, Siddhi, is forgiveness. So in gene keys, they take that expression of archetype and they see how it plays out and the shadow vibration and the gift or the genius of that key, and then how it transcends and includes all the people that are connected to the energy. So it becomes a whole, a wholeness, a unity expression. So in some way, you could call that kind of a heaven, but it's really just like the higher expression of being sentient. Ah, yeah, pretty much. But I'm looking for accuracy when probably, it could just be, again, heaven. It can just be something like a theory, which is part of this energy. Interestingly enough, I had this down in, at least in my notes, as the 13th. And then when I went back to look at it, it was like, oh, that's not the right chart. And then I went back again and I was like, well, that's my notes for the month. And I was like, oh no, it does say the 12th. So that's why it's coming out on the 13th instead of the 12th. And it's interesting because I think this is very much, although it's not a key player in my profile, it is something that I think affects me, and this idea that I'm going to figure it out and that will make it perfect or okay or worthy or whatever aspect that I'm looking for in a moment. In this case, in the Western astrology, we're looking at just this effect of having so much of the energy on the other side of the chart and having this feeling like we're everything that we want to do is being opposed by what is happening. And so getting that feeling can feel like you're not able to come to a full culmination. So this is a good one to find out where in which house that's happening in your Western chart, because in my opinion, that means that in that house, wherever you're feeling your full moon, there's a culmination for you that is only kind of for you and your energy, instead of like kind of this mass understanding where we're all feeling like we want to be seen in what we do, and that we want to be bold in what we do, but we're not getting that, in maybe the places we are hoping. But it is available, but it's just like in what area for me, in what area for me. And so for me, like where I'm like, wish I was getting more of that energy is be in people seeing me, being visible, and this kind of thing. And what is happening in my chart is actually in my spirituality and my greater understanding. And I find that to be true. Like if their abundance is existing, it is in that right now. I'm feeling really great in my meditations and my energy work and all this kind of thing. But the practical things are just like, right? So What does that look like for you in this at transit, so that you're not um, feeling a lack of abundance overall, right? That's what can happen if we are looking in the wrong places to be supported. So there you go. Let's talk about kind of that moving through vibrations of the shadow, gift, and city of the gene keys. Intolerance is the shadow, and in that shadow, it's playing off of this programming partner of 49. Reaction is the shadow. And so in that, what's happening is we're reacting to our emotions as if they are truth, right? So while emotions are always valid and worth looking at, they are not who we are, right? And so if we're believing that our emotions are the equivalent to what is real or what is true, we can get confused a little bit, and we tend to react out of emotion and not have, again, kind of the relationships, the outcomes that we're looking for because of that, right? That's why we feel it as a shadow. It's like, oh, I'm reacting, I'm not proacting, right? And to what I'm creating, I'm reacting to what I have not yet received, right? That's what it can feel like emotionally, energetically, emotionally, right? So that's so interesting because, again, I really like Karen Curry Parker. She's running a free challenge right now. And today she was speaking about, it was a live, she was speaking about energy, getting your energy needs met. What I love about that is that in Verve Vision, our podcast, we're talking about a very similar thing in the dynamics of power and status in being able to make waves and be seen and be recognized for your work in the world as a woman, essentially. So in that way, in the way the world sees women, right? So that's why I'm not kind of qualifying that for people who aren't um, standard gender duality, gender. I don't know how to say it right now, but basically that they non-binary, right? So that's what I was trying to find. So yeah, that non-binary, or just having a different attitude or stance with the idea of gender, right? And so if that's what we only see each other as, which we're going to actually talk about later this month in the new moon energy, if we're only seeing each other as gendered, right, then we are having aspects of society that are keeping us from being fully recognized in what we do well, right? And so this book is about how do we approach that? What can we do about that? And it's very, very, very good. So if you haven't joined us yet, you still have time. We're going to do our workshop in March. So you have time to read the book, absorb it, maybe even try a couple things out, and then come to the workshop and see what you want to like keep in place for how you move forward in those things. But in essence, it's that feeling of wanting to being able to meet your own needs, right? And so Karen Curry Parker was talking about that and what that creates when we feel like we are not, and we're having a not productive way of getting our energy needs met, our our emotional needs met, our physical needs met, right? So when we see that in society, we say that's a breaking the law, right? If you only have like you can only get something if you can take it from somebody else, that's against the law, right? So it's not a good approach to getting your physical needs met. And it's the same thing emotionally. So it's kind of that background of textures, how I think of the programming partner, that kind of elucidates why the shadow is the shadow of intolerance here, because essentially we're using something that's meant to be a greater understanding, a greater, which is the gift, like the greater understanding, the greater inclusion of truth as a logical choice and product. F means to an end, like any means to an end, if that, right? So that feeling is what causes the trauma pattern of the shadow here, right? So when this is the way of misusing logic. If you're using that idea of what I know can make me feel like I have it, the energy I need, the power I need, that I feel safe, that I feel solid. So in the quote I got from the Gene Keys, I think it helps you understand what I'm trying to say a little more clearly. This is one of the reasons why I didn't go ahead and make the video yesterday, because this energy is kind of recombobulating me a little bit. So anyways, the quote is, mental assuredness cannot make the body feel safe. And I think a lot of us, at least me and a lot of people that I also consider to be lifelong learners, possibly intellectuals in some ways, right? That we have this idea that the more we know, the more safe or more secure or more even powerful we will be, right? In the ways that we feel are necessary to be safe. So that's the thing. That's the thing. That's where that shadow is taking us. It's taking on this kind of a non-fulfilling journey of, just because you know more doesn't mean you're going to be better or safe, better off or safe, right? So in the genius, what it's meant for is to read and resolve logical patterns. And now that we understand that the mind isn't the only thing that gets us there, you can see how, like, to resolve logical patterns can be a good or a not so great thing. Because if you're saying that the logical pattern is having its own conclusion, that's taking the stance the mental can fix it. And then on the other side, that no thinking is going to fix it, right? Like if I stop thinking altogether, then that's the truth of what I need to experience. So understanding is really being able to hold the truth of what's the information is in front of you or that's been absorbed, and coming to an understanding that is greater than any bits of data that you've accumulated. So this is in the gift, this is the ability for the wholeness of understanding, which does require the body. That's something that in the body just settles in. You just know, those times and nobody could talk you out of what you were going to do next, or those times when you just all of a sudden knew that it doesn't matter if it's a good step or a bad step or whatever, you knew that's what they were doing next, right? And so that whole body recognition does not necessarily require cognition, thinking. It can actually be just an openness to a greater understanding of our senses, of our spirit, right? And when we're working together in groups and having these things together, like one of the things that we need to know is that we're not always, again, sometimes we're using knowledge or logic to feel safe with others in our relationships, in our groups of being. So we're saying that, oh, because I know this about you, and that can be relationships or groups. We're also saying that to ourselves, what we know about ourselves. So a lot of times I'll get people that say, well, I'm not a singer. I don't sing. I'm not a singer. Right. And some people are kind of just like, yeah, well, I sing in the shower, but that doesn't count, kind of not singers. And they're pretty chill about it. And then there's the people that are very clear that they are not a singer. And that usually marks to me some kind of trauma. Why? Because somebody told you, like, singing is such a natural aspect of being human. A little kid is going to hum to themselves. They're going to, sing along to the music they're hearing on TV and their favorite movie. They're going to do that, whether they're good at it or not. Somebody tells you at some point that you're not supposed to sing, or you get that impression because of somebody else doing it better, right? So that to me is like locking into an identity of who you think you are. And if we do that, we can often not see what we call blind spots, what we aren't understanding about ourselves or the world that we're acting in, and why we're getting the results we're getting. That's why I get stuck in these patterns that we don't like, right? So that's just kind of an understanding of how it's playing out and just the being of human. So let's talk about the shadow so we can recognize it. What I love about recognizing the shadow and the gene keys is because we're usually, we're just like we were more ready to, not ready, but we better remember pain. We avoid pain more than we seek pleasure. I'm sure you've heard that. It's the kind of the same thing here. We recognize shadow before we see the good all the time, or what's playing out as genius. Whether that's again out of training or habit, or um, like just being in fight or flight mode and just feeling like that's more important, so you notice where the danger is, right? So in the shadow, the repressive side in Gene Keys says apathetic, right? So this is giving up the ability to understand anything logically. This is saying, oh, like it's not worth it because you're somewhere along the line, you decided that you weren't smart enough, you weren't intellectual enough to understand. And so you just stop trying at all. You're scared to have any opinions, or you're scared to feel responsible over anything, out of the fact, the feeling that you can't get it right out of your lack of understanding. This is also a feeling of lacking energy, just because that catharsis of, well, I don't, I'm not smart, so I might as well just continue to be brain dead, right? Like it just kind of perpetuates itself, right? And then on the reactive side, it looks like nitpicking. So this is like having so many I know that there's all these rules that you have to the way you live your life and how the way you think other people should live their life. It's, you think that the more solid the rules are, the understanding of the logic is, then the more secure your life will be, and the more secure other people could be. So you might even be worried about other people's safety if they don't know the rules, right? So if people that don't know the rules scare you, so that's starting to look like being afraid of, cultures that you don't know, or being afraid of people that weren't raised like you or don't look like you, right? So that's just kind of that all around healing. So I like to do that because sometimes we may not have a personal experience of these things, but we can recognize it in others as well. It's like, oh yeah, I know people like that who, like, if they can't find a Bible verse associated with a thing, that that it must be evil. So that is kind of where, and it happens in science as well. So you find this also in science, or they don't understand science or math the way I understand it, so it must be wrong. And there's no solid anything. Things shift based on perspective, and we all hold our own perspectives. So that's where truth can get a little dicey, by whose metrics and by what standard and all this kind of thing. So societal and learning, right? So let's go ahead and apply this to our lives. So let's see what this looks like when we are looking at, maybe just not the general life, because we talked about that in relationships already, but in our business and the legacies that we're creating, whether that's in a single event that allows us to share most of or all of who we are, so that people know us even better than they did before, or a business that is about making your mark in the way that you feel that you can most impact the world at a higher level. A lot of people are kind of climbing that stair step. That's just a matter of being human, of having bigger, better ways of sharing their love, vibration, service to the world. And so I am in that business. I'm in that business of greater self expression. So I have a whole list of possibilities of what could be up for this key. You could apply the key to anything and everything, but what I do here is I kind of dip into my intuition and see what wants to come up around this energy. So in the gene key of understanding, we have all these little departments of business and events. We have HR, we have marketing, we have sales, we have finance, management, fulfillment or customer service, be it R&D or education. So I choose kind of different ones. I almost always choose marketing because I always have an intuition about marketing, how we are connecting with others, and the truth and authenticity of ourselves, right? So HR is our first one. This is the first time we're using HR for the year. How fun is that? So, what came up for me around HR is that we're often, in a lot of us that have worked in businesses that have a HR department, and especially large HR departments, how much the way that the policies of HR can get in the way of the way we are actually having to physically live out an experience at our job, and or to get the job, or to speak about who needs to be fulfilling a job. All right. It's this feeling that if the boxes are checked, if we've made sure that they've had the degree and that they've had the experience, and they've, like, those little boxes, that they must be the right thing. And even overlooking people that aren't fulfilling the boxes but are perfectly capable of doing the work, right? It's a big problem because I think also something that people think works so well that they can start putting it into little boxes for the computer to figure out for them, right? So AI. So what we get to know about HR and this understanding is that those boxes aren't going to recognize the fit as well as a human to human interaction, in which you are physically seeing somebody do work or similar work, and or having that experience of being able to train one to one. And so there you can see how easily or how difficult it is for them to do the position. And so that is just going to be something I think that we're going to continue to have to understand, that people are better at feeling out the possibilities of people, because we all have expressions of our being that we have not yet expressed. So just because they haven't done the degree yet doesn't mean that they don't have the understanding to be very good at something. We have, there's a ton of movies about this. Right? There's a ton of movies about people that shouldn't know what they know, and then you give them like a seed, an apple seed, and they do more with a little bit of information than somebody who's been studying it for 20, 25 years has, because they have this innate ability. And if we don't give people opportunities to kind of move into those things, and we all lose out. We don't get to have that genius at work in our societies, in our ways of sharing with others, right? So it's in my opinion that intuition is actually way more useful when we're talking about these HR facets. You can, and if you don't trust your intuition, again, like real life experience and interaction at the minimum. So that kind of thing. Marketing is our second department. So our second department is marketing, of course. And this one's actually really short. Remember that we said it's not a logical thing. So there's a lot of systems that are proven systems. And the reality is, just like there are so many different people and there's so many different ways of being, this is also true in your marketing, because you're often trying to fit in like a specialized niche. That's how some people call it, but specialized in that it's the culmination of your genius, not necessarily an corporate department, right? So it's a culmination of your genius and the meeting of the marketplace and their desire. And that looks different for everybody, right? So if you're going with a proven method, you're going for a proven method that somebody else did for their energy and their market, right? And I know they have 1,000 ways of convincing you that's not true, but that's the truth of the reality. And if it's not a way that you have already chosen to, something that's already made sense to you in your energy and your desires and your market of like who you're talking to, then it's not proven because you haven't done it yet, right? So never think that you're failing at something that was made for other people. And then, yeah, find something that's closer to who you are, that if you're looking for the proof, okay? So that's one part. And the other part is kind of how I think about when I do marketing. And when I created a system of marketing, or when I put together some ideas of a funnel of how I will share my work or will do something specific, it's this aspect of kind of sitting down with, okay, I do know these boxes. I do have this data on what I'm doing. I know what I want to share. I know what's powerful about that. I know what people are looking for, and I know what people are looking are ready for the information that I have to share. That's kind of how I see it. And to me, there's always a spectrum of like, are you just going to look for something the market's already looking for and the majority of the market is looking for? And then it's like mass marketing and more money, more, more sex, more, right? Those are kind of the mass marketing strategies because it catches the most eyes. And then there's kind of the other side of that spectrum of almost artistic business, where the business is made to serve the passions of the creator, the entrepreneur, and then people will meet them when they have, I think of it as energetically kind of magnetize people to that location. So it works both ways. It has worked both ways. It's just that, again, more predictability with more numbers, right? You can predict, the higher the numbers are, the better you can predict what the next number will be, right? So it's up to you on how you sit in that. But I like to sit in that place and then have a kind of a physical, ooh, that feels good. I'll do that next. And that's usually how I approach my marketing. Doesn't provide super consistency, but it does provide high passion. And so I usually have clients that come in highly passionate and ready to go, really excited about doing this work, right? That's why I like that approach. Now, the third department is R&D and education. So R&D is research and development. And so sometimes people are research and developing to see the best way to make a product or the best way to have the product to meet the needs of the people that are going to use it, right? The education piece is often more solopreneur maybe, but also there's departments of education in large companies because people may have gone to school 10 or 20 years ago and they need to have a refresher or an update on how their information is being applied that they learned so long ago. Also, new technology, also a thousand other reasons why education is required in a business. If you are of the departments as being one of them, you might need to go learn something to make that happen. Why did I apply this for the gene key of understanding? Because for the people that like to use education as more of entertainment, and I don't find that to be a bad or wrong thing. I consider myself a lifelong learner. How else do I learn all this random information, y'all? Like that's how I do it. I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn, and I'd rather learn than be out here talking about stuff, right? But the reality is that if you're doing it for your business, it should be applied to the business. So if we're not applying it in an immediate productive action in some way, we may be using our love for learning as a replacement for doing the work as a procrastination. That is also possible in that aspect that we are talking about earlier of thinking that if I know more things, I will then be assured or confident, right? And I see this all the time for clients is that they think, oh, I'll learn this thing and then I'll feel confident doing the thing. And it may be true. Maybe you just have that gap in knowledge. Sometimes the skill must be learned from somebody who has the understanding. And maybe it's not. So we have to be able to sit. You have to be able to sit and feel that out. Do I need to know this to do what I want to do now? Or can I learn that later and apply it to a new generation of what I'm doing now? Right. So everybody's a little different on this. I like to do, like, because I know I can learn forever and I will, and I am. I keep learning, I constantly learning. I read too much and I have several classes going at a time. That's just the way I live my life. I like it. Jupiter and Gemini, yo, that's how I roll. And so, so I will always choose learning. Can I learn this and be more productive? Yeah, I think so. I think that's almost always true. That's just the way I'm made. right? And am I missing out on the length of time that production and action is happening in order to learn and never getting to the action? That's something we have to sit with ourselves and find out and find the right ratio of. One of my mentors was saying that you should be able to, for everything that you learn, you should make pieces of content. I was like, ooh, that's not going to happen. Like I do, I mean, every day, every day. So it's not likely for me. I don't have that much time in the day, right? Like, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe I do, but comes down to that's a little bit much for me. So for me, it's like everything I learn, I have, uh, I would say maybe one piece of content. That would be my goal. I'm not saying that's happening right now, but everything I learn having at least one piece of content related to it. Which is why my content tends to be so dense because I tend to try to just pack everything in there. So I could go back to learning. but but that's the truth. We are and in our learning, we're also, that's a part of our digestion system. Um, literally, like literally energetically. So when we are learning, we are imbibing, right? So if you never get to work, like if you're never actively doing anything and spending those calories, where do they go? They go back to the body, becomes unhealthy, you get backed up, right? Constipation, things are happening that are not healthy, right? If that was food. It's also true for knowledge and experience. So that's why we sometimes have these, we'll often have physical problems when we have an energetic backup, right? So that can be in knowledge, that can be in emotion, right? If something that is hard to take in emotionally happens and we haven't allowed the time to digest our emotions around something, and it can cause a backup of trauma or of that we keep in our bodies. That's how that happens. Anyways, I think that's enough of that for now. I hope you've enjoyed this rendition of Gene Key's Transits with Monifa. And yeah, oh, I have a my program. Well, it'll be a VIP day. So there is a program called Vocal Alchemy. If you're not sure anything about it, or if you want to know more about me before you get to it, you can join us for my VIP Day Amplify You, where we are really delving into some amazing things around what it takes to have this process of showing up in our action and our active productivity of being our authentic selves. So it's this way of just feeling really confident, really solid within your body, within yourself, not just in your idea of what you think is or should be. And it also is, we're going to talk about applying our knowledge. So, how are we organizing what we know, have, and are doing, our different projects, and how we're going about them? And what I find about lifelong learners and what I find about creatives and people that are constantly, again, imbibing beauty and understanding and enjoying the world in that way, is that it gets clogged up and then we don't know how to get it into a place of clarity and action, right? So we'll be talking about that. A really simple process. It's just a really understanding so that you can start to place things in the way that makes sense for you. And then, yeah, and then you walk away with a way to reduce your task list into 3 things and like just let that be your guiding light until we have a better felt understanding for each action or each way of being, whether we're in a learning stance or a doing stance. So if you are interested, you'll find that in our description, and I will see you there.